Um, so Carl, before we get rolling here, and I apologize, I shouldn't be still eating, but my day went a little long. Evan's chuckling because everything I do seems to be running at least a couple minutes behind, I'm sure. Uh, you've got a distillery, Ardnamurchan, which we're going to talk about. We've got a couple of whiskeys there. Maybe we can get to that in a minute. But more importantly, Adelphi is an independent bottler that's now, well, I think your birthday was it technically last year? And we just got the ball. Yeah, it was technically last year. So you're now in your 31st year, approaching your 31st birthday. But um, before we roll into this, do you want to give people a little bit of a background on Adelphi before we dip into the lineup? Like a quick, the
Yeah,
Coles
yeah,
Notes version
yeah,
of what you need to
absolutely.
know about Adelphi.
Yeah, and I'll touch on a couple fun bits actually that indirectly pertain to the first dram. But yeah, Adelphi, right? So it goes all the way back to 1826. I'm not going to do that lengthy version, right? But we, started as a distillery in the 19th century in Glasgow. Um, Distillery went through its ups and downs. Is now it's where the Glasgow City Mosque is for any of you that want to visit Glasgow and go to the south side of the river for some strange reason. But that's where it once was. Um, the original founder, the license, sort of the modern history is the great great grandson of the original founder, Archibald Walker, who owns multiple distilleries around Europe, including the original Adelphi distillery. His great great grandson found out that the license for the brand was randomly owned by a law firm in London in the early 90s. So he bought it, kind of being keen on the family history, turned it into what Adelphi is now, 31 years later. So independent bottler, predominantly focusing on single cask strength bottlings, which is the majority of what we're having tonight, or yeah, at least a large chunk of it. We do some batches ranging from a couple casks to a dozen for sort of the Laudale, Fascadale end of things. But yeah, basically all about the liquid. We focus on either finding something that really represents the distillate or is bizarre and weird.
Mhm.
So either end, typically, especially if it's a newer distillery that we haven't um, bottled before, we'll trend towards the former, right? We want to find something that's really clean, not cask heavy, showing what the distillate can do. And then, once we've done a whole bunch of diluents, for example, we can kind of find whatever we want that is interesting or fun or just super delicious. That's pretty much Adelphi in a nutshell.
Mhm. And yeah, you're not afraid to do things that are a little different. Like for example, the Ardnamurchan cask that came out, which was an independent bottling of your own single malt that was determined to be rather weird and
Yeah,
give it
rather
its own
weird
name.
is a diplomatic way of putting it. Yeah, but it's funny. Like that's probably one of the more talked about bottlings of recent history. So I suppose that in some strange way, all press is good press. That paid off. But yeah, Ardnamurchan's a fun dram if nothing else.
It was a fun dram. It is something I don't think I would ever drink twice. Um, but and again, I don't want to stray too far down the garden path here. I mean, there have been other bottlings of not just Ardnamurchan, but other bottlings from other distilleries where occasionally I've gotten like this insane kind of pickle juice note from. So I don't know if is there a theory on how that all came about? Was it just a really funky cask or?
There isn't anything to my knowledge. That was released before I joined the company. In fairness, although I was aware of it and in touch with people, my now colleagues at the time. I don't think it's really been chalked up to anything other than that's hilarious. Let's keep the cask and do it again. So yeah, for those of you that haven't had the distinct honor and privilege of tasting Ardnamurchan, perhaps there will be an Ardnamurchan 2.0 at some point, and we'll see what happens there.
All right. Well, I like the intriguing sound of that. So we're going to kick things off. You said you had a bit of a segue. We're starting off with the North British 1987 single grain. This is one of the 30th anniversary releases that you did. Sadly sold out. We only received 6 bottles. In fact, I think with a lot of these, the allocation for the market as a whole is quite small. So we got some, a few other retailers also got some, which, to be fair, is kind of a fair way to do it. And I'm not just saying that because I think I saw Spencer just log in there. I'm saying that because, hey, we can't get everything all the time. There's other good retailers that need to get a bit of love too. But I was especially excited about the last whiskey we're going to try tonight, getting that allocation. But I wasn't disappointed to get the North British either, because I do love a good old single grain. So yeah, tell us about the North British.
Sure. Yeah. So indeed, yeah, this was from the 30th anniversary release. So yeah, the 30th anniversary was a November of last year, which is why, with getting across the Atlantic and such, you guys get it, I guess, technically in our 31st year. But as we're wont to do, we found a decent occasion to just pull out the stops and put out some pretty fun, cool, interesting whiskeys. So yeah, it's a 1980s grain, right? It's fun, interesting stuff that you don't get to taste every day. Maybe Andrew does, but most people don't, certainly.
Not every day, but second day maybe.
So yeah, North British, co-owned as of now by Diageo and Edrington. We have a very good rapport with Diageo. Say what you will about certain aspects of what they do, but from an Adelphi perspective, us being able to bottle cool casks and get them to market is pretty much contingent on relationships, right? It comes down to people like Alex, my boss, our managing director, Caol, my other boss, our sales director, knowing people, having chats, playing golf, and not being jerks. And that's how you get tasty liquid. And it's still pretty old school that way in Scotland. So yeah, this is
I have to say, Carl, is a pretty good business strategy. I like to think that I hopefully qualified for that category, but
I would say so. Yeah, if what's behind you is any indication, I'd say you've succeeded. But yeah, so interestingly, this is a refill bourbon hogshead. This is 47.5%, 36-year age statement, I believe. Is it 30? Yeah. And just a lovely representation of what grain whiskey can be, right? I mean, I think grain whiskey, especially when it's super old, does really take on some delicious traits. But I think it's nice to see more bottlers getting grain out there, even in the teens, 20s. I mean, you can get some really tasty liquid. A quick historical tidbit, and I won't go too far down that path, Andrew, I promise.
Go deep.
So so North British was founded in 1885, and one of the co-founders of 3 was a man named Andrew Usher. Andrew Usher, rightly or wrongly, but most would probably say rightly on some level, is considered sort of one of the grandfathers of Scotch whiskey as we know it, right? He was one of the original guys to see the potential of blending whiskey, after William Gladstone, who is, by the way, the Dancy Man of Adelphi. That is a sort of cartoon depiction of William Gladstone. And he is the guy who made government tax only the liquid that came out of the cask, not the liquid that went into the cask. So not only does that mean, you don't have to pay up front, but it also means you don't pay for the angel share. So that was a huge thing. That was the early 1860s that occurred, and that really transformed blending and the industry in general.
Yeah, well, I was going to say he also made it possible for blending to happen. Some of those rules, and I mean, it was happening in a small scale. But the other one that's weird to think about is prior to this, I don't believe these changes. I don't believe you were able to bottle and then ship off to sell whiskey. You had to sell it from your premise.
I think that's right. Yeah.
There's an interesting footnote that I love that people don't mention about this, was that he might have had an interest in changing these rules because he owned Fettercairn Distillery. Yes. Or at least Fettercairn Distillery was operating on his estate. Tenants were running it. But I love that, especially with the rose-colored glasses that 180 odd years bring, like it's more amusing than it is. Like I'm sure that a lot of decisions made at that time were
Yeah.
because somebody had a political interest in it.
No, 100%. And just to quickly like kind of wrap that to where I was going before I got wrapped up in William Gladstone. So Andrew Usher, one of the co-founders of North British, happens to be the great grandfather of our current managing director.
Oh,
So there is actually a family link to Adelphi and North British. Ironically, the last thing I'll say, North British was actually created because DCL had a monopoly on grain,
wow.
and now it's owned by Diageo. So
Yeah.
it's come full circle. But
Sean's got a good question here, but I don't know if you knew there was another interesting connection, which is there's a shop in Edmonton called Whiskey Drop that's owned by Graham Usher, who is actually a descendant as well of Andrew
yeah,
Usher.
there is a Canadian connection to that side of the family, I believe.
Wow.
Including I had heard that once, but I had forgotten that, and that is wild.
Next time you're in Edmonton, you have to go see.
Yeah. Where? Sorry, where's the question?
Oh no, I'll bring it up for you. Sean was
All
wondering
right.
why we don't see a lot of grains like this anymore because for ourselves, like we've been big into independent bottlings, big into single grains for a long time now. We used to see, from our perspective, way more 20 and 30 and 40 something single grains than we do now. It's like they've almost dried up. And
Yeah. I they probably to some degree have, right? If I'm honest. And I also think that, for the same reason, we'll get to, Adelphi building Ardnamurchan and the reasons behind that. But I imagine there's some overlap there, right? Like once demand gets to where it's been in the last 10, 12, 15 years for whiskey, and you know that you have a 1980s, 1970s grain or early 90s or whatever it is, like you're going to be a lot more inclined to hang on to that if value is just skyrocketing day by day.
Mhm.
Um, that would be just a personal hypothesis, but so there's probably people. I imagine Signatory still has some wild stuff that they don't tell anyone about. I'm sure Gordon MacPhail does. I'm sure there's some stuff, but there's probably a little bit of both there.
Curiously, Gordon MacPhail's only released a handful of grains ever.
Yeah,
Because it was never in their wheelhouse. The
true, true.
signatory there might be some to that, but now that Symington's just running his tractor and not allowing people to go see him, I guess we'll never know until the liquid pops up.
Yeah, yeah. But it's do people like it? I think it's a pretty cool dram. It's if nothing else, it's interesting. Um,
It's lovely. I mean, you're starting to see something that's especially, it's 36 years old. It's starting to get some like pretty prominent oak tones in it, but still fresh. I find North British often has like a medicinal note to it, and I don't know if it's just the way they make the grain whiskey there. Um, but yeah, it's very pleasant. It's elegant. Sadly, it's all gone. And as Sasha said, it was a great price, which is probably why it didn't last. So, I mean, that's the other thing that we've gone through, and Carl, you and I had a chat about this over beers not too long ago. Some things in the industry got overpriced. One of the things that I want to shout out to Adelphi Ardnamurchan for this is that a lot of your stuff has stayed relatively reasonable, and that's in a market where things were getting a little out of control, and I think things like that are going to pay off long term. But uh, great grain whiskey, really lovely. I don't think we need to dwell on this too much longer. We're going to come back around. We do what's called the speed round. So we'll come back and see how things have changed and evolved in the glass. And if anyone's not been on one of our tastings before, which I doubt because I recognize most of the names, if you have any questions, comments, put them in the chat. We'll be happy to bring them up as we go. But Miltonduff, uh,
yeah,
tell us about this miraculously old Miltonduff.
yeah, it is that. Yeah. I'll just quickly add, by the way, for those that haven't met myself or anyone on our team, we're open books across Adelphi and Ardnamurchan. So to Andrew's point, like please engage in the chat. We're happy to answer questions. And if I can't answer it, Andrew or Evan might be able to, or else, I'll get the answer for you after the fact. But please don't feel like we like to have fun and and hear what you're thinking. So
And
yeah, Miltonduff. This is quite a peach. This is it's not very often I get to do a tasting with a 40-year-old space adder. Yeah, so Miltonduff. I mean, look, it's 40. It's still got 50.4%. There's only 174 bottles of this. So 1982. Miltonduff's a cool. I mean, I guess what I would talk about with Miltonduff, it's in the Shivis stable. I believe if I have this, if I'm going back to sort of when I've studied, I believe it's fair component for Ballantines.
yeah,
And I think the coolest thing about Miltonduff to bring up, just for people who drink whiskey and have, you know, the privilege to drink independent bottlers, is like this is what independent bottling is about for me. You know, like Miltonduff makes, I think, 6 million liters a year, and we don't see any of it unless you get an indie. And, you know, distilleries like that, you know, Tianinic, that makes a ton of whiskey as well, that you're not going to see very many official bottlings out there. I think this is what is so exciting about working for Adelphi is, you know, we get to put out really cool whiskey from distilleries that people don't get to see. And that's really fun for me.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and only a couple bottles of this came in, so we cracked one. Miraculously, we have one left. I think this one's kind of flown under the radar. And
Yeah.
maybe it's the fine print, Carl. People are just glossing over the 40 years of age because the print on there is relatively small. But yeah, well, I mean, as they are on all Adelphi bottlings, and they have been since I think even before Alex Bruce. Like, I don't know if
Yeah.
Alex was involved at the very beginning, but one funny little side note, when I started at the shop in 2003, we had some Adelphi bottlings at that time that had been around for, by best guess, about 5 years. And most of them were like 20 or 30-year-old independent bottlings. And I think they were so far ahead of their time, but people didn't know what they were.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost as if the people that were buying that kind of whiskey couldn't read the print on the label. I don't know. I just thought it was funny, but we had Adelphi way back when, and I think that Alex and I talked about this once. I think they were probably from a time before he was even with the firm.
Yeah. He started in 04.
Yeah.
So that would have been Jamie buying stock. He started in 93, right? Hence the 30 years last year. So Jamie Walker, that would have been under his stewardship, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Anything in 03. But yeah, I mean, I think I remember, I don't have any of this left, probably because when we did tasting notes, I just demolished it because it's pretty easy drinking.
Well, it's interesting. You know, I'm just quickly looking at the producer note on it that you guys have. Your own tasting note.
Oh no.
Calvados note is a really cool one because it's definitely on there. It's got this waxy, cheesy, funky, fruity thing. It's like a kind of an old school, not even like a charcuterie board, but an old school cheese tray. With
Yeah.
grapes and soft cheese.
I remember there being like, I don't have the distillery notes in front of me, but I remember there being a cool kind of like juxtaposition of like Miltonduff at younger ages is usually like quite bright and floral. It's sort of like that lime zest floral thing going on, at least for me. And this, I remember this bottling because of that age, it has that, it's still there, but it's, as you said, it's got that like orchard floor, like earth. There's like definite earthy, funky traits as well. And I remember like just loving the way that those two work together. Not just a non-complex space adder, that's for sure.
The palate is quite waxy, some nice citrus tones in there. It's straying a little bit into tropical notes, but I am getting a note that for me reminds me of like being in school when I was a kid. And that was, the that sort of waxy thing that held like pads of paper together. Did anyone else ever just like pull those off and chew on them? Like just when you were bored, or like, it reminds me of that wax strip that was on like loose leaf or whatever it is, pads of paper. from being a kid.
That's quite a pull.
I would not suggest people do that. It's probably not the sorts of things your body needs to absorb. Doug's comment, still malty. Yeah, it is still malty
Yeah.
and beery. But yeah, for me, I'm just driven by like how floral and waxy it is. It's far from over the top. It's starting to get a little bit of a bitter edge to it, but I mean, 40 years of age, it's hard to think that it would not have that. And that Calvados note on the nose was bang on.
Yeah.
Jeff saying that there was a reminiscent, I think here, of a 1920s cognac. I think that's where, well, that I'm not sure which thread that's on. This has disappeared. Anyway, cool dram. It's showing its age well. I can't think. I think I've had maybe one other Miltonduff in this sort of age range from Gordon MacPhail. Like it's not something we see a lot of.
No.
But it is a distillery I'm quite fond of, especially refill cask, 20 plus years of age. It can be quite special. And if you like it, there's literally one left.
Yeah, it's a treat.
For
sure.
Should we transition over? People can keep commenting on that if they like, but maybe we should transition over to Ardnamurchan.
Sure.
And what I might do while we're doing that is, if you want to do a little quick intro on that, I think, doesn't your homepage have like a little video thing that
should yeah, new website, which is even if it's an improvement, we'll put it that way.
Yeah, well, here, let me
regardless of whether you think this website is terrible, it's an improvement.
Hey, well, I get it. So here we go. A little background. So yeah, do you want to tell people a little bit about that? We can let this roll in the background.
Sure. Oh man, this is a funny video. Yeah, so Ardnamurchan, so I alluded to it earlier, but this was Alex's kind of mid-aughts, mid-2000s, pretty prescient realization that demand was going to outstrip supply in the next, it wouldn't take too long. So the most viable option at that point as a small independent bottler focused on quality was to build a source of liquid, and that's how Ardnamurchan was born. This is just kind of like a mildly outrageous lifestyle video of us being silly on a beach on the peninsula. So this is the team, but basically, broke ground in 2013, and then first distillation July of 2014. So we're actually tomorrow, or a month from tomorrow, we'll have a 10-year-old cask. Or no, maybe it's today, July 25th, 26th, something like that. So yeah, 10 years in, way up in the Western Highlands. For those that are not familiar, I'm guessing people at an Adelphi tasting probably have some familiarity with Ardnamurchan. And yeah, we're just making hopefully good, honest, characterful, engaging whiskey. And that's the ultimate goal. Kind of do it with the same ethos that was behind Adelphi, which is liquid first, right? That's the way we can get away with those outrageously small labels. It's about what's inside the bottle. So yeah,
Carl, I'm going to add to that. On that note, is I think there's a lot of people in the current day and age who appreciate companies that stick to their branding and don't change it all the time, because man, some people get really butthurt when you change their Aaron bottles, labels, and shapes, which is a reference I haven't made in quite some time. Yeah, because people they sort of they become their own ambassadors for it. They have their own way of looking at it. And anyway, my advice is don't change your packaging too frequently. It doesn't improve sales typically.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're pretty happy. We've tweaked Ardnamurchan in the last couple of years, but we're at a place that we're pretty happy with now, and no wholesale changes in the future. So not to fear. So this dram happens to be probably our most sought after whiskey, if I'm honest, from Ardnamurchan. We are on Paul and Wall, right? Is that?
And It's also sold out, but I suppose
Yeah,
people can place a pre-order next time we get it. We'll put you on the list. Unless
it's
Spencer's got a secret case hiding in allocation that he wants to free up, but
well, this is the 2023, so we actually just released 2024. So you will have it certainly. Well, I guess I'm just gonna throw you to the wolves here, Andrew. But yeah, you'll have it this calendar year for sure.
which something else might be arriving this calendar year from Ardnamurchan.
Indeed.
Maybe we can tease a little later, not just yet.
Yeah, sure. I'll let you drive on that.
We'll roll that out at a random moment. So
Yeah.
tell us about the Paul Line Walk connection, because
Yeah.
this is at least the third or fourth release you've done of this.
This would have been the third. Yes, believe that's right. Maybe fourth. Yes. So, and I actually am lucky. I found a little. Look at the elegant labeling that I pulled out of my cupboard there. PL 2023. So I have this to drink with you all. And yes, I am drinking out of a teacup, by the way, because I'm at an Airbnb, and that is what life has come to.
You don't
So here
travel
we
with,
are.
you don't travel with whiskey glasses?
I genuinely intended to bring a Glencairn and completely forgot for this purpose.
You got to get some of the mini ones, the same shape, smaller size.
Yeah,
Perfect
even more
travel.
breakable. Also, can you imagine me with a mini Glencairn? I'd look like an absolute imbecile.
Yeah, that's fair. They look pretty ridiculous in my hands, so they'd be like completely ridiculous in yours.
Yeah. So sorry, I got sidetracked by my teacup. So
Can we see
basically we were introduced to a couple, Julian and Sarah, and they run Champagne Paul Launois. It's named after their son Paul, who's 12 now, and they own and operate a Grand Cru champagne house in Le Mignon-sur-Roger, for those that like their wine or like their bubbly. And they just make insanely tasty wine. And what they basically do, they have a single barrel project for their kind of loyal customers, where they'll do bespoke casks, bespoke toasting, and the customer purchases the cask, gets all of the bottles once it's disgorged, and then they send those single barrel casks of varying toast levels to us. We take all unpeated Ardnamurchan spirit that had been in first fill bourbon, and we re-rack to those. Now, for those that want to get Rulosaurus on me, I understand they're not champagne casks, they're Chardonnay casks, but it is a champagne producer, so give me a little wiggle room on that.
What if they used Pinot Meunier and Pinot Noir, Carl? Then we could
fair. Actually,
deep rabbit hole here.
We have. I love that you went there. I was wondering if someone would get after me there. It is predominantly Chardonnay casks that we get, but they do grow very small parcels of both of the other two grapes. And yeah, so we get about 12 casks a year, which is why this is quite hard to get, is simply they're a very small producer. And those are the casks that we get. So that amounts to, this year we got an extra one. So we got to just over 3,000 bottles, but I believe the bottle that you're on, if I remember correctly, it's something like 2676, like under 2,700 bottles. Was that bang on?
You're like Rain Man. Yes. I think if we dropped some matches, you'd have the exact number for us.
Still got it. I didn't even have notes on that. That's actually perturbing. So yeah, cask strength 57.1% on this 2023. And it's just tasty. Excuse me. We don't do a ton of unpeated expressions either, which makes this kind of extra special in that regard, because you really get a pretty good look at unpeated Ardnamurchan distillate, but it still has that really interesting, unusual, wine barrique tinge, and I think it works for what there's a salinity to, or a lot of people like to say there's a salinity to our distillate, and I think it lends itself to to an earthy, kind of quality driven wine or champagne. So for me, it's a great dram, but it's not for everyone either. But it certainly is fun and unique.
It's so approachable on both the nose and palate. It's quite surprising. And I can't remember from the description. I know just had that up. Like, do you have what's the age on it? Is there a vintage? Like, what's the?
Yeah, so it should be 6.
Mhm.
I believe it's something like 5 years in bourbon, and then it's always about a year and a half in the barriques.
Because I mean, it doesn't drink like a 5, 6 year old, 7 year old whiskey. Um,
No,
some nice fruit, nice malt. There's definitely that salinity there. You can feel that on the sides of your tongue. And yeah, this nice sort of kind of cheese and quince paste thing, which I get a lot of sort of cheesy tones from Ardnamurchan whiskeys, and I'm assuming that's because of relatively long fermentation, something like that, but also a lot of fruit. And yeah, you're one of the early ones, but admittedly, Ardnamurchan is one of about 40 newish distilleries to open in the last, let's call it 12, 13 years. But I think you've been one of the ones that stands out for us because we do love the distillate that you guys are laying down.
yeah, it's quite. I mean, working with good product in any facet, whether it's at your end, at the retail end, or at our end, kind of working for the producer with sales. It's not to get too gushy, but it is quite a privilege, right, to sell something that you genuinely love. And yeah, I like her whiskey a lot. so that makes it
That
pretty.
probably makes it easier to sell.
Yeah, distinctly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope everyone else is digging this particular release, the Paul Launois. Again, sadly, we're out, but well, fingers crossed for the next release of this that we might see a little bit more because it certainly didn't last long. Why don't we move on to the cask strength? And again, this is the 2023 cask strength bottling from Ardnamurchan, which
Cool.
I believe we do still have. So
Nice.
I'll put that up on here just as soon as I find it. There we go.
Yeah. So cask strength is, I think this on the other hand, I suppose is probably one of the better, other than a single cask, is the opportunity to see Ardnamurchan peated distillate, and really get a sense of that. So the core idea here is we don't just do a cask strength version of the flagship single malt. This is a fundamentally different recipe, and I think that's probably the biggest thing. So as opposed to 50-50 peated, unpeated, and 2/3, 1/3 bourbon to sherry, which is what the flagship core is, cask strength is 95% peated. We toss a couple of unpeated casks in there just for balance, and maybe a little bit of additional fruit. And then it's also about 90% bourbon. So we want that peated distillate to shine. It's natural cask strength, so 58.1 in this last year. I think this is a really, really fun bottling for us to blend, and it's a good opportunity to kind of highlight kind of how Alex has worked since starting the distillery, which I always think is quite cool. Rather than having a master blender, I mean, Alex is certainly developing his sort of legend status in Scotch whiskey day by day. Master the Quake, he's done Adelphi for going on 25 years. Has Ardnamurchan now, but he sort of intentionally folds us all in. So there are 6 of us on the blending team. I actually was able to join this calendar year after they made sure that they hadn't made a terrible mistake in hiring me. So which maybe the jury's still out, I suppose, but they let me join the blending team, which was pretty cool for me. And we go around the room, right? We go around the table. We're nosing all these samples when we're blending something like cask strength. And if something noses off, it doesn't go in, obviously. We let that sit. And that's one of the beauties of whiskey, right? You just leave it in the warehouse and let it develop. But that is how single casks tend to happen, or is in that room. If we find something that's really unique or really pops, very often we'll still put it in the blend to make sure that we have something to make our expressions, as good as we want them to be. But if we have the leeway, we'll set that aside and make that as an option for cask strength for whether it's an entire market or a retailer like Kensington Wine Market or whoever it is. That's kind of the process there, and that's always a fun realization when someone on the team notices something and their eyes kind of like light up, and all of a sudden we might have something to work with. So that's a cool bit.
Yeah. Couple questions, and I know Evan was suggesting that he thought this whiskey might be the love child of Kilchoman and Springbank. Doug's saying it's more like Kalila to him. To me, the interesting thing is, and I'm wondering if this might have something to do with where your peat comes from, but to me, it's actually more reminiscent of some of the spirit coming off of Torvig, which is this really sort of kind of ashy, grassy peat, as opposed to like that classic medicinal Isla peat. And I'm wondering if you can maybe comment quickly on where your peat comes from.
Yeah, of course. And I think, it is Highland peat. So I certainly agree with what you're getting at there. I think for me, Highland peat, if we're generalizing, has that sort of slightly softer, heathery character to it, and ashy, depending on how it's processed and what you're looking at. Some of our casks can trend Isla. We have that salinity, right, wherever it comes from, that can kind of meld in an interesting way with Highland peat. But I agree, for my palate, something like Talisker Torvig is definitely a pretty, if we're in the same sentence as a 10-year-old distillery as literally any of the distilleries that were just named, Springbank, Kilchoman, Talisker, Torvig as well. I love what Torvig's doing for their age. That's incredibly high praise. Kalila as well. Kalila being like, we'll get to Kalila later.
We'll get to
won't touch on that yet.
Just before we finish with Ardnamurchan and move on, because I mean, for me, it's a fascinating distillery. I've been there a couple times, although it has been about 5 years now. And interestingly, I don't know if I told you this, but I actually filled the 3rd ever peated cask there. It might not have been numbered number 3, but it was the 3rd one. And it was a club here in Calgary. We bought a peated and an unpeated cask they've got to be close to 8-9 years of age. I'm not sure where they're at yet, but we're patiently waiting on those. Anyway, my question is, do you do anything different fermentation wise or distillation wise with your peated versus your unpeated malt?
Yes, we do. Yeah, thanks for raising that. We use 2 yeasts for unpeated. I don't know if you knew the answer here and you were just prompting me, but regardless, thank you. So yeah, peated we use just a standard distiller's yeast. Whether I think that's a good idea or not is up for debate. I mean, it would be interesting to do a run with the additional yeast, which is a brewer's yeast, and adds considerably more esters to the mix. So some of that high level fruit that really pops, and I do think is essential for our unpeated distillate. I would love for us to experiment a little bit more with yeast, but as with anything, it is important to contextualize experimentation with running a business, and I think that's the reality. But I think we are getting to an age now where that sort of thing, a little even more experimentation with barley, things like that, I'm hoping will be more and more coming down the pipe.
Well, I for one hope you guys do try some runs with that, because I would love to see that combination of both the smoke and that fruitier spirit.
Yeah.
But we'll just have to patiently wait for that to come out in 8 to 10 years time or so. Once you've arm wrestled your way, which you should be able to do, you've arm wrestled your way to convincing the team to let you give it a try.
Yeah, it's just I have the leverage if nothing else, right?
Lots of leverage.
Long forearm, yeah.
All right. This is an interesting one for me because I think this is actually the first time I've ever tried spirit from Akkeshi, and I
Ooh,
think we have one, maybe two bottles of this left, according to the website. So this was another one of your 30th anniversary releases. The reason I was keen to try this is because I've never had Akkeshi before. It's peated. So do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about the whiskey and how you guys got casks of it?
yeah. I actually don't have a firm answer to that. If I
Okay.
were to guess, and I can confirm or deny myself after the fact. We have a very good relationship with Chichibu for the past quite a few years now, for both Adelphi single cast and also for the Glover in our Fusion series, which again we'll touch on here momentarily. It may be an introduction from Ichiro, or it may just be Alex having a knack for meeting people and knowing people, and we are lucky. You know, Adelphi has garnered a reputation as someone who's not going to misrepresent your distillate. So I think there's that as well. So I think there's probably a bunch of factors there. I'll confirm, unless you already know
No,
yourself.
I don't. I mean, there's some interesting things happening in Japanese whiskey, but the problem is they're clouded in mystery because from an outsider's perspective, we see a few legitimate distilleries, new ones opening up, but then in Canada we have all these what I like to call Japanese-ish brands that are pretending to be Japanese, and if you're really lucky, they're actually partially maturing the whiskeys in Japan for at least a period before blending and bottling. So it's a country that I kind of stopped sort of paying attention to because I got frustrated by some of the opaqueness around who is an actual producer and who wasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a distillery that's not really been on my radar, and I think again partly too because there's been such a proliferation of distilleries in Scotland and North America and Europe, like all over the place, that it's hard to stay on top of everything now.
Yeah, I think there's also just the fundamental reality, and Doug, a good point from Doug, but not only do they not make very much whiskey, I mean, they were founded in 2016. So, I mean, they're in year 8, they're younger than Ardnamurchan, and yet, the online prices for a bottle of Akkeshi are already starting to get ludicrous, which is upsetting. But yeah, it's peated distillate. Akkeshi is on Hokkaido. So the other distillery on Hokkaido, I believe there's only one other, and it is Yoichi. So they're using Hokkaido peat, which is also pretty cool. So locally sourced peat. For me, and I probably shouldn't, I don't know. This is one of the better 3-year-old whiskeys I've had.
Yeah.
Like maybe ever. I think it's absolutely glorious. And it is obviously young and bright, and I don't know if I would even say sharp though. It's really tasty.
There's no rough edges to it. The mouthfeel, the palate at, what are we dealing here with bottling strength? 57.8.
0.8, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's shocking. There's nothing on the nose, nothing on the palate.
No.
Devin commented how this was so clean, and it is absolutely clean.
Yeah.
Citrus, smoke, salt. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting bottling. And
yeah, I bought one real quick. Because in fairness, like we really try to get Adelphi out there. We don't try to, it's not like I'm buying the whole release, because there just isn't any of it, right?
No.
But usually we get to get 1 or 2. And this, I mean, it's just such a distinctive dram to have in your cabinet. There's nothing. I don't have any other whiskeys that are quite like this,
Well, and that note about it being Japanese peat as well too. I mean, that bucks the trend. Like Yoichi's not using
No.
Japanese peat. Like Hackshu with their peated isn't using Japanese peat. It's peated malt from Scotland that's getting shipped over. So
Yeah.
very cool. Yeah, obviously a rarity. So the price is what the price is. But for 3-year-old whiskey, I agree it doesn't drink like 3-year-old whiskey, which is really surprising.
Yeah.
All right, transition here. Sandebud Fusion. Let me pull it up on the screen here. Uh, Fusion malts, that's something you guys have been doing. It's an interesting concept. This is, I suppose, the northernmost one of those fusions that you guys have done.
Yeah, indeed.
High Coast, formerly known as Box Distillery. Tell us a little bit. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about the concept behind the fusion range and like why the partnership?
Yeah, sure. So I just mentioned the Glover, which was the first fusion. And I'll try to be quick, but basically Alex was approached to do a commemorative bottling for this gentleman named Thomas Blake Glover, who's kind of bizarrely a Scotsman who's an icon in Japan. Like 4 million people a year still visit his home. He founded like Mitsubishi and Kirin, among other like rather formative Japanese companies. Long story short, he grew up in near Glengarry, so they were trying to do a Glengarry to commemorate Glover. Thomas Blake Glover was like the, I don't know, 200th anniversary of his birth or death, or some important date. And Alex basically was like, well, why don't we do a Japanese whiskey blended with a Scotch? That went a number of different directions, and that is how the first batch of Glover was born. Then we turned it into this fusion concept. So we get to work with other whiskey makers that we know, like, and respect, and make a fun, interesting dram. And then it's always named after, at least loosely, a Scottish person who was influential in that country of the other distillery we work with. So Sandebud is with High Coast, again, as you said, formerly Box Distillery. High Coast is an area of natural beauty. It's way up on the east coast. It's about 4 hours drive north of Stockholm. So it is up there. Really, really stunning part of the country. The only time, from what I've heard, I should say, I have driven past it, and it was in a blizzard. It was a wild drive.
One of your team members should have some insight into that.
Indeed, yes. So Jenny, our marketing and communications manager, is Swedish. She is from just outside of Gothenburg on the West Coast, and she is actually headed to High Coast this weekend, which I am pretty jealous of, if I'm honest. they throw a festival.
You do get to go to Montreal, but
yeah, I like Montreal. In fairness, great town. But I imagine the High Coast Festival is a lot of fun. So yeah, it's 4 casks, Sandebud. So I believe the Ardnamurchan is 2 hoggies, like a PX and an Olo. And then both of the High Coast are bourbon, all peated. So peated dram 58.9%. It's a cool one. It's, again, High Coast, I believe, uses Swedish peat. I'm like 87% on that. So a cool mix of Western Highland single malt and Swedish single malt. And if you haven't tried High Coast, depending on where you are, it's worth a go. Their distillate's really cool. Their team is brilliant. Which for me, it's all about people. So that's a decent enough cost to try a whiskey, as far as I'm concerned.
we've had historically a decent selection of both Box and High Coast, but it's an uphill sell in our market. And I think part of it is the price. Like getting it from Sweden to Canada is not cheap.
Yeah.
Maybe the distillery, because they're able to sell it at a certain price in country and maybe in Europe, but they've been a hard sell. I mean, the sad thing is, I really like this. I think the nose and palate on this are both great. This doesn't drink like a 6-year-old whiskey. This
No.
drinks like something far more mature and more elegant, but it is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's for 6, it's not especially cheap, but yeah, I do think it's quite a tasty dram. And again, I mean,
So fruity. And there's a
not
nice,
gonna. Sorry,
sorry.
go on. No, just rambling. Fire.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's sweet, it's fruity. There's some nice malt tones there. Um, it's floral. Like there's a really nice complexity to this whiskey that I really like. Uh, and I wonder, and I'm not sure how this does in other markets, but uh, like, do you get pushback from anywhere about this? Because, obviously you've taken the product of two countries and you've blended them together, because the blended malt space for us is one that can often be very difficult. Um, but I mean, this is something a little different. This is, trying to create a product that's the, result of two different whiskey styles from two different countries, but it's very tasty.
Yeah. Do we get pushback? I don't know. I think you might get people that are a bit skeptical if we're pouring this at a tasting or a festival, which I just don't. I don't think there's merit for that off the bat. If you don't like it, you don't like it. I have no trouble with that, right? But I do think there's, as you say, there's an interesting stigma attached to
Yeah.
blending malt whiskey in any way. But I think the optimistic way of putting it is I think it's an opportunity for us to use Adelphi and that reputation to make sure that people are branching out and trying fun, weird things. That's the whole point.
Mhm.
So yeah, maybe a little bit, but it's at the end of the day, it's a good dram, and that's what
Mhm.
matters.
Yeah, I agree. It to be honest, some of them like you did the one with the millstone, which I thought was quite interesting too.
Yeah, yeah, we've done. I can give a little tease. Well, since we're on the
Sure.
topic, the next one will be Kiwi.
Oh,
Will be New Zealand. Um, but yeah, we've done Australia, we've done India,
yeah.
whole bunch of things.
Well,
So
you're gonna have to do Canada soon. And Evan's suggestion was to blend with two brewers in the Yukon. And
right,
I sarcastically suggested you could perhaps call it the Franklin edition because of the guy who got lost searching for the Northwest Passage. There's probably a better connection. I mean, almost certainly. David Thompson, there's a good Scot who mapped more of North America than anyone else, but and actually crossed the Rockies before Lewis and Clark with
all right,
less resources and much more potential peril, but not as famously. So I think a big part of Alberta is actually called David Thompson country because he mapped it out. Anyway, he did a bunch in the Arctic. I think a David Thompson edition might be fitting. So,
it's a great plan.
but anyway, without going too far down that garden path, we should probably head over to Kalila.
Let's do that. Um, do I have this one?
2016, so a youngish
Ooh, yes.
Kalila.
Mm,
I do love how you're drinking out of that teacup, Carl. That's
yeah. I'm staying true. Um, it's a vessel. It's functioning well. So is this right? Sorry, let me just make sure this is indeed. I don't want to. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll know as soon as I pour it. So what I would say about Kalila is Kalila is just incredible distillate. Um, and this is what I was mentioning right off the bat, which is to say, like, you can talk about Diageo all you want, and it's a real shame that they bottle Kalila 12 at 43%. However, it is known in the world of bottling, of blending, of pretty much anyone in the industry, the word on the street is if you bottle a subpar Caol Ila, you should rethink what you're doing, and maybe just choose another career, because the distillate is so good that it's pretty foolproof, which I'm not really giving ourselves much credit here, but it's the reality. This is a fun one. This is probably younger than most Caol Ila we put out. We usually let Caol Ilas get at least to the teens. I think like bourbon aged Caol Ila 12 years or like 12 to 17 is like pretty outstanding almost always. But this is a pretty cool one. So first fill Oloroso Hogshead. As I recall, it was like quite fruity for me when I had it the first time, but then that like fish oil Caol Ila thing kicks in somewhere in there. Oh,
Jeff's commenting that he'd actually like to see someone, he'd be impressed if someone bottled a bad Caol Ila. I have actually tried some bad Caol Ila.
yeah, I've had a couple.
Sulfur tainted sherry casks, which, I mean, that'll ruin just about anything except for something destined for Germany or Scandinavia.
But you still put it in glass, you know?
You do, because as I said, there's a market for it in Northern Europe.
Oh no, I guess I was saying like someone still found a way to mess up a Caol Ila and then choose to put it in a bottle anyway, which is a shame. But
I've also had some dreadful wine cask finished or matured Caol Ilas that weren't necessarily flawed, they were just not good. So
yeah,
but I think Dave Broom once said it is the most consistently good distillery, and that is a feat hard to beat. Yeah, it's interesting. I can see a bit of a citrus, like a lime citrus thing on this, but it really is being driven by salt, fishy tones, and then I got a rather distinct sort of Play-Doh note to it as well. Maybe
I also
home.
get like like cedar closets to protect against moths. It's got like a cool like cedar woody thing going on, but like it's not a cask wood. It's like a cool weird.
It's a anti-moth cedar wood thing.
Yeah, that's why they pay me the big bucks.
That's why they pay the big bucks. Where do you require cedar to combat moths? I thought.
Did I make that up? Is that not a thing? Does anyone else have me there?
Toxic mothballs. I thought that was the. I mean,
cedar is used to combat moths.
It's used to kill what?
It's used to deter moths.
Oh, interesting. I had no idea. I mean, is that partly why they make humidors out of it, to protect the tobacco from moths?
Don't know.
Maybe. I had no idea. I living in a part of the world that doesn't have a huge moth problem, I guess that just never came up.
It's weird. Like I did grow up in a house with a cedar closet. I don't know. Like I hadn't ever really thought about that being outrageously bizarre, but it is. So it's one of those weird sensory things that it wasn't complete BS.
Maybe just cedar was so cheap where you lived that you're like, it's cheaper than paint. Let's just put up cedar planking in the closet.
Yeah. Hey.
And it looks good.
Yeah.
Who doesn't like the color of cedar? It's a lovely Caol Ila. It's young. It's a little rough, but that's kind of what you'd expect from a 2016 Caol Ila. It's not aggressive, but it's a little brash.
Yes.
It's like, some Scottish soccer fans on the tram or train after a game.
Yeah, lovable but brash.
Lovable but brash.
Yeah, I would agree. It's also got like there's like a capers.
That's a cool note. I like that. All right, Bowmore, and then we'll start the speed round. So I was thrilled to see this one. I love a good Bowmore. 1997, sadly sold out. But part of your 30th anniversary range. Tell us all about your Bowmore there.
Yeah. Just I don't have like it's a refill butt, I believe, refill Oloroso butt. So just shy of 500 bottles for $492, 55.5%. So pretty good proof for 27 years, 26 years. This one for me, just wild tasting notes, like rancio, umami, crazy smoky traits.
Mhm.
I guess what my chat about Bowmore is like, hopefully, I mean, I guess I've had a dram or two now, so I won't like aggressively disparage their core bottlings. But I do, if I see I guess what I'm saying is anytime I see an indie Bowmore, I'm inclined to get it because I don't very often just go buy a standard Bowmore.
Mhm.
I don't love what they put out for their OBs. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah.
So that's my slightly aggressive chat on Bowmore.
Man, if that's as aggressive as you get,
It's not. I'm
um,
just. This is my job after all, so I have to
no,
be.
it's true. It's true. Uh, you know, the funny thing is like I can see parallels between this and 15, 18-year-old Bowmore. Like it's within the wheelhouse. Um, I mean, it's a frustration for me knowing that they're probably caramel coloring, knowing that they're balling at 43 has been a frustration of mine. I love the whiskey. I love the distillery. I'm even an apologist for some of, but not all of the sweet lavender, we call it now, as opposed to the more euphemistic terms from the past. Uh, Bottlings of Bowmore. Uh, so I get where you're coming from on this because this was I think this was my first whiskey. This was the whiskey that got me into whiskey. It was someone bought me a bottle of Bowmore Mariner. I think the next one for me was Lagavulin, and I was sort of hooked. But it's got a nice balance of sherry notes without being over the top. It doesn't have, and maybe someone else is getting it, but like curiously, I'm not getting any lavender on this one. I wonder if anyone is picking something up themselves because I'm not. Maybe a twinge on the palate, but uh, yeah, it's a lovely bottling. Uh,
Yeah, I
Parma
like it quite a bit.
Violence, if you don't like the style. Evan, that's a good one. That should be the name of you should do a bottling called Parma Violence.
Parma Violence. That
In fact, I
feels.
want to do that now, Evan. If we don't make a whiskey, Evan, we're going to put that on a t-shirt and we're actually going to follow through this time. Parma Violence is a great idea. That might be one of the best Evanisms to come up in a very long time. Doug saying there's a slightly smoked floral note, but no lavender. Devin, love the cigarette ash on this era of Bowmore. Yeah, cigarette ash is a good one. This isn't cigar ash. This is like, well, I know he never worked for Bowmore, but this is like Mike working next to Mike Nicholson. Well, at Diageo, at either Kalila or Lagavulin, chain smoking cigarettes.
I think you should. Yeah, you can probably sell Parma Violence to SMWS for like at least a couple $100. Like I feel like they would eat that up.
Yeah, Parma
Yeah.
Violence. I mean,
They would have to find another Lefroy to bottle, and that's getting hard to get.
Fair enough.
Evan, Evan, it's gonna have to be a t-shirt. I think, you know what?
Yeah.
Next time I see Ollie at Elixir Distillers, I'm gonna chat him up on this. I'm gonna romance him on the idea, and it'll
Mhm.
happen. We'll make it happen somehow.
I could see Ollie after a few bevies getting
Yeah.
into it.
I think Ollie could be probably persuaded. But 3.421 balance. When you crowdsource this stuff, it just gets better and better. Uh, this is a lovely Bowmore. I'm actually keen to put it side by side, and I know I mentioned this to you, Carl. I'm only going to plug this because we can't get any more of your Bowmore, but
No, you
we've still
should.
got a little bit of the Kensington Berries Bowmore, and uh, I'm not going to trouble everyone with this now, but I'm going to wait till we come around the horn and do our speed round, just to see how this comes up. But not as sherried as the one you've got, but another refill. But all right, ParmaViolence.com is already taken. Oh, God. So, Evan, I'm going to call you in on this because I know Carl doesn't have all the whiskeys in front of him.
Sounds good.
You're going to be my speed round co-conspirator here while we go back through the whiskey range. So, should we start off with that North British 1987?
Yeah.
Oh, man. That just keeps opening up. It's soft. It's
Yeah.
fruity.
It's a
Yeah.
beautiful grain. It does have a lot of fruit notes. It's got a little bit of that like acetone slash nail polish remover slash linseed oil thing going on.
Yeah.
But in a good way.
And a lot of like Stampede quality like pancake syrup
Yeah.
and like flapjacks. It's got that in abundance here. Carl, if you came out this way in like 10 days or so, you could hit up Stampede, but just saying. That
Yeah.
North British is showing really well. Are you while we're on that subject, are you heading home for a little bit, or are you going to go straight back to Scotland once you're done?
I'm heading. I have a week of vacation in Maine, which is going to
Nice.
be glorious, if I'm honest.
There you go. Lobster rolls.
Yeah. It's going to be lobster, like hoppy beer and reading books and not thinking much beyond that.
There used to be a great beer from Maine that we used to get in Alberta for a short time. And they made
What
great.
style? I probably have this.
They made an East Coast style IPA. I think that was what they were. And they were one of the first ones where we got a New England Pale Ale from as well.
Ooh.
I don't remember the name of the brewery. This is going back about 8 years now.
8 years, 26.
Sean might know it.
Sean might know. Sean will chime in on the chat if he's paying attention.
From Maine.
Yeah, from Maine. Pretty sure. Pretty confident it was from Maine. Maine Beer Company, Sean is saying.
Maine lunch.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, in 500 ml bottles. Yeah, that would make sense. That's good beer.
Evan Miltonduff. I'm getting like a peanut brittle thing, but then also
Yeah.
like some tapioca on there too.
Yeah, peanut brittle is a good call. It does have a lot of that sort of like lush Miltonduff fruit coming through, but there is something like hard edge polished wood note coming in with it as well.
Oh, I mean, that's on the palate. It's waxy, it's fruity, it's floral. It's kind of what you want it to be for a 40-year-old refill cast Miltonduff. Pretty lovely.
Leather baseball.
Leather baseball. I've never had one of those in the face, let alone mouth, thankfully, but I can kind of see where you're going with that. Ardnamurchan Paul Launois. Oh, it's fruity and toasty and buttery.
Yeah, creamy on the nose right now for me.
It's on the nose especially, it's got that like creme de Bourgogne with like little bits of whatever those dried candied fruit chunks that Crystal puts on the plates. Like it's
yeah, the dried pears and the dried apricots, and it almost finishes like a little bit effervescent or bubbly. Yeah,
it is like annoyingly. It actually has a fizziness, and I feel every time I say it, I feel like such a salesman. You know, like feel like come on, man, the champagne cask you're gonna say is effervescent. Like, come on now. But I do think there is a little something there.
Yeah. Have you guys ever savored a bottle?
Well, that's a splendid idea.
You know what? You probably could, but it would be better to do it at like a high elevation, like where we are, because the pressure
pressurized
might be higher than it is outside. Otherwise, you might just be like.
I feel like you're overthinking this. I think you just got to do it.
Yeah.
It's just got to happen. So I'm going to savor a bottle of Paul Launois before you bottle Parma Violence.
All right.
Right now.
Parma Violence is going to take some time to work out, but I mean, I think ChatGPT has got us covered on creating a logo for our new brand / t-shirt.
Sabering and a lot of thought being put into something rarely go hand in hand as well.
Like I would be willing to try sabering a bottle of Paul Lanois with protective gear. Let me put it that way. But no,
I'm gonna butt in because Doug, I have to respond to this because it's. Did you do that on purpose, Doug? Good man. Yes, there is a distributor in the UK for the champagne, and it is the Ardnamurchan sales team. So
Well,
we are the distributor of the champagne in the UK,
Nice.
which is outrageous and amazing.
Spencer is on the chat from Onyx, unless he's had to leave.
Is he
I
here?
seem to think they bring it into Alberta as well. I'm here.
Could be.
He says. He's going to answer the question. Do you bring in Paul Lanois? I seem to remember an email suggesting that you did. I mean, the unfortunate thing for our shop is we have like 5 different exclusive champagne houses. So it's kind of hard to bring in others. But
Another
I
one.
seem to recall that no, unfortunately. Okay, so they don't. Maybe someone else will want to bring in Paul Lanois, but
It's in the States for sure. And
Mhm.
I can ask them who it is. I've asked them before and I wrote it down somewhere, but I don't remember who it is. I don't know what their representation in Canada writ large is like.
Well, if there's a chance that champagne is anywhere in the country, it's definitely in Alberta.
Yeah,
Um,
true.
Mhm.
It's also, just for the record, while we're plugging their champagne, it's actually like shockingly affordable for a Grand Cru champagne. Like it's not like you're gonna be $250 out. You know, it's
Hmm.
really, really well priced. It's like made for drinking. I mean, within reason. You know, it's still expensive wine. Don't get me
So it's
wrong.
not
But
like a bottle of Krug with
yeah,
bespoke earbuds
yeah,
as a
exactly,
package deal. Gotcha.
exactly.
But that's the Salma Hayek margin, right? Like she needs to be kept in a lifestyle to which she's become accustomed.
Right.
So
Which, fair enough.
Evan, we've lost track here, but Ardnamurchan Cask.
It noses like the Hershey's cookies and cream chocolate bar right now.
It's incredible how
Wow.
much the smoke has blown off on this now. It's
Yeah.
still there, but it's so faint.
Least speedy speed round ever. Accurate.
Well, the speed round often gets stuck in the mud, but we definitely got a little extra stuck this time around. Hey, Evan Akkeshi. Oh, the smoke's come back on the finish. That second sip on the cast strength, the smoke has come back with forks.
I just got to put this out chat wise, just to go back to the Paul Lanois cask. Someone saying we should bottle it. We could call it Sec and Parma Violence for that one.
Sorry, one more time.
Yeah. So Sec and Parma Violence, as in Sec
Right.
being, yeah, exactly.
Dry Parma Violence. Hey, look, just Evan, write those down.
Yeah.
I'm getting
I'll
like
keep the
big
chat.
time
Yeah.
deli salami on the Akkeshi right now. Like sliced pepper salami, when they've got the little ring.
Yeah. And I think, is this the one where you mentioned the seaweed wafers?
Yeah, seaweed wafers.
Yeah, it's still there, even with a little bit of the sesame oil with it.
Oh, sesame oil is a good call. Man,
Hmm.
that has no business drinking as good as it does at 3
Yeah.
years of age.
It's staggering.
It's almost infuriating, but it's Carl, again, because we're getting stuck in the weeds here, but I also feel we haven't gone over time. It reminds me of I'm starting to feel how these 4 angry British men, one was English, 3 Scottish, when we did a tasting introducing Cavalan for the first time, and I poured them the Vino Blind in a range with sherried whiskeys, and 19 out of 20 people in the tasting picked the Vino Blind as their favorite whiskey, including all 4 of these British guys.
Oh no.
They weren't surprised when I revealed it. They were angry. Like they thought someone was trying to trick them. I kind of understand where they're going from now, because I can't believe how good that Akkeshi is at 3 years of age.
Yeah, it's upsetting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the typical Japanese thing where they take something that somebody else does and makes it even better.
Damn them. But in such small quantities that you can't have it
Right.
That's right.
because it's bespoke. They probably have a guy who sings to each cask. I mean, that's probably the bottleneck because they're massaging and slowly rocking and singing to the cask. It's hard to scale up a business like that. High Coast Ardnamurchan Fusion Sandebud, 6-year.
The sherry on this has softened up quite a bit, and it's gotten more coastal in a good way for me.
Mhm. It still drinks well. It's a little dumpy after the Akkeshi.
Mhm.
You know, I worry that it's going to fail to launch compared to the Akkeshi. Like the Akeshi's already got his life planned out for him. This gun's just like waiting around at home. But it's a nice dram. Drinks well. I like it. I don't know why I went down that rabbit hole.
I really enjoyed that.
2016.
Yeah. Yeah. How are your daughters doing, Andrew? Would you like to tell us?
One of them's doing great. She's got a job in a house and well, an apartment and a boyfriend, and yeah, great. We'll just leave it at that.
That was properly saucy from Eckersley.
Yeah. Oh, he knows. He already knows. It's like me asking you a question I know the answer to. Kalila 2016.
It's gone more fishy, but in a good way.
There's something on this that makes me think of like peated Loch Lomond.
Hmm.
Because it's kind of got this almost mezcal thing. Carl, you talked about how the first time you tried it was really fruity. The first time through, I didn't find it really that fruity at all, and now I'm finding it much fruitier.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's a bit of a chameleon here.
Yeah, it wasn't fruity when I poured mine tonight. I remember that from when we tried it for the first time, but also like it was probably half pissed because usually those tasting sessions were on Zoom and like we've tasted 12 cask strength Adelphis
right.
and things get a bit loose.
Plus, you're drinking from a teacup.
There's that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's actually my preferred tasting vessel.
That's fair. I respect that.
Yeah.
Evan, anything on the Kalila before we move on to Bowmore?
It still has like big bright malt and grain notes on the palate. I see where you're going with that sort of mezcal tone though.
Cool. We probably don't need to address Jeff's comment about home ownership on the coast. Admittedly, it's not that much better here right now, so it would be probably not going down the. Anyway, Bowmore, on to Bowmore.
Oh, this nose is just gorgeous. It is a little bit floral. It's super tropical. It's got a touch of French onion soup with the toast and the Parmesan cheese on top as well.
Yeah, Evan, that French onion soup, you got me thinking of like High's Steakhouse now with like their garlic cheese bread, French onion soup, like a nice rare New York cut steak with a peppercorn sauce. Oh man, there's a lot of fun things going on there now too.
Yeah, that's a really good cask.
The complete lack of segue that you just had from tropical to French onion soup is like really roiling my stomach. Like I'm not, that really didn't work for me at all. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But you went straight from one to the other and it really
it's like you had a Mai Tai, like with your French onion soup. That's all.
Please stop. No, I do see what you're saying. It was
could
just
be could be another t-shirt idea, possibly maybe. But
tropical French onion.
Violence.
It was there were Maui onions used in the French onion soup, man.
That's right.
It works. Yeah.
Oh, all right, Evan, I'm assuming you've put together a poll for tonight's tasting.
Yeah. You'll have to launch it. Unfortunately, I don't have access to it.
I'm gonna fire that up here right now. So
I did add a third question.
Oh, we're always wondering if there's a third cheeky question and what it might be. But the poll's up. You've got a few minutes here to pick your favorites. And the cheeky question is, which remote location should Adelphi build the next distillery at? It's a cheeky question, but in all seriousness, like, why build another distillery? Just wait for one of the other current ones to go out of business and
Yep.
Exactly.
for the fire sale price with casks.
None of it.
You don't want to build a distillery there.
No.
It's remote.
Yeah.
My wife had to go there 2 winters ago, and it involved 5 flights, and she had to put a snowsuit on for the last 2 just in case the plane had to make an emergency landing. So you probably don't want to go up there. Also, she's a pescatarian and had to eat presumably seal because, there's no vegetables up
No
there.
other source of protein. Yeah.
Yeah, it is what it is. But Doug's suggesting tax credits. Hello. I mean, who is it? Metallica went to Tuck to Yuck Tuck. I mean, I'm sure they didn't go there for free. Tuck to Yuck Tuck might be a good location, Carl. If Metallica went there, you guys could go there.
There's probably a lot of puns with that. I have no idea where that is, but I'm loving, there's a lot that I could do with that, I think.
It's almost as close as you can be in Canada, and like living with proximity to Russia would be
Right.
so like it's way up there.
Because
Yeah.
everybody wants to live close to Russia right now.
Yeah, it's a good time for that.
All right. While we're waiting for the results to come through from the poll, I haven't checked on it. Carl, I know this is a tough one for you, but if you had to pick favorites from tonight's lineup, either going from memory or present experience, what would your 2 or 3 favorites be from tonight's tasting?
I mean, probably Akkeshi cast strength, Ardnamurchan cast strength, and Bowmore.
Okay.
The Ardnamurchan, I have to say, just because it is our peated distillate, and I love that whiskey. And everyone picks Paul Launois, and I love it, but the cast strength doesn't get enough love. It's kind of like it doesn't ride under the radar. That's not fair to say, but I love that whiskey, and I just like 2 complete opposite ends of the spectrum from an indie perspective, right? Like 3-year-old peated Japanese whiskey that is, as you said, has absolutely no business being as good as it is. And then just a 26-year-old Bowmore. I mean, it's not just any 26-year-old Bowmore. I think it's a pretty cool cask as well. So those are probably my 3.
Okay. Respect.
Andrew.
Top 3.
Me?
Yeah.
I will go North British. I just think like it's not necessarily coloring outside the lines for an old grain, but it is a really, really good old grain. Next up would be I agree on the Ardnamurchan cast strength. There's just something about that bottle that I really enjoy. Might have to pick one up at some point. And then the Bowmore. That just a really, really good Bowmore.
Yeah. I'm gonna go Miltonduff for my 3rd favorite, just because I love old Miltonduff, and it's got that sort of quality. I know I've dredged this up once or twice in tastings where like there's a scent there where you're not sure you like it or not, but you can't stop smelling it. That's sort of hooked me into the Miltonduff. So I love the nose on that. The palate's great. I'm going to echo you guys. I think the Ardnamurchan cast strength is awesome, but it didn't make my top 3 because the Akkeshi edged it out, which really blows my mind.
Yeah.
That Bowmore, I mean, I don't think you can beat that Bowmore in tonight's lineup, unfortunately.
No. For the record, because it is hot as hell in Canada, some people might think this an abomination, but the cast strength makes an outrageous highball.
Oh, no, not at all.
Oh man, it's dangerous.
Little bit of soda, a little bit of mint, ice.
Yeah. Keep it simple. You can make it complex. It's good.
Okay. All right. I'm ending the poll here because everyone who can vote has voted. So here are the results. Not surprisingly, Bowmore sort of steals the show round 1. Miltonduff is 2nd, and then the Akkeshi and the Ardnamurchan tie for 3rd. But going to second favorites, look at that, Evan, you are vindicated. Miltonduff storming to the front.
North
Both
British, you mean?
Americans showed well, and the Kalila. Those are some interesting results. Like, we don't get kind of clean cut, clear
Good
results
spread.
not very often. And then where should you build your next distillery? Campbellton is the winner. Now, Carl, are you going to take this feedback back to Alex and say, "Hey, Alex, it's time to open a distillery in Campbellton"?
I will.
I've got
Yeah, I
I've got
will.
this new idea that nobody else is doing right now for you.
Yeah, and
Let's
he
build a distillery in
definitely
Campbelltown.
he definitely doesn't say on a weekly basis that if he were like, he basically says outright he would not start a distillery today.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah,
basically business suicide. Why would you start a distillery?
yeah.
now?
I mean, admittedly, unless it's in Nunavut.
Yeah.
Which,
Or Tuktoyaktuk.
yeah,
I mean, which is
Yeah.
technically in the Northwest Territories. It's another huge swath of Canada, about the size of most of Europe. But yeah, it's remote. But as Doug said, you get tax breaks. So
fair.
yeah.
I will say one cool thing that makes me happy by my calculation, which may be incorrect. There's only one whiskey between first and second votes that didn't get at least 2 votes.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Which is Sandebud, which is fair. I get that. I think it's an interesting whiskey, but in this lineup, it's going to struggle a little bit.
It's in tough competition.
But it's cool to see every other whiskey get at least 2 first or second votes.
Well,
that's pretty all right.
Bowmore stole the show on number 1, but it didn't get a second. It didn't get a single vote for second favorite. So
Yeah.
Some clean cut lines. Well, listen, Carl, I really appreciate you doing this tasting. The timing couldn't have worked out better while you're in Canada. I really hope you enjoy the rest of your time in what people where you live refer to as the center of the universe. And I also hope you enjoy. You're going to Montreal. You're going to go to Schwartz's Deli and do the Montreal smoked meat and cherry Coke.
Yeah, I have been to Schwartz's Deli. I will definitely be going to DDCL for old time's sake, for my beer days. That has to happen. And I will strive to eat some tasty food. We'll see what form that takes. But
is Ardnamurchan available in Quebec?
yes.
Maybe you can arrange a bone marrow luge with Ardnamurchan. Do you know what a luge is, by the way?
Yeah, sure do. Yeah, I did it at some outrageous restaurant in Manhattan at Connell's behest.
You should definitely do an Ardnamurchan bone. Montreal does great bone marrow. That's all I'm trying to say.
I'm very game for that.
Yeah.
Hunter was just in Montreal. He strongly recommend Cheval Blanc as well.
Cheval Blanc. I know of Cheval Blanc, but I have not been. That's
Dudiciel brewer actually went on to create that place, and like I was just at Dudiciel as well, and I would say that Cheval Blanc might be like just a little bit above it. It's pretty cool.
Hunter, is your T-shirt promoting gun violence?
It's the state of Florida.
It looks like I know it is. Looks like
but
why?
After the Stanley Cup, it is kind of promoting violence.
It is
outrage. I wanted to ask Carl, are you in Maine right now?
No, I mean I'm literally in Toronto right now.
Are you going to Maine? Was that one of the also Mason's Brewery is fantastic. I don't know if it's as common out there, like how hard it is to get to, but Mason's makes some really wicked stuff too.
Sorry, where's that?
It's in Maine. Where in Maine, I don't know, but Maine's.
It's called Mason's.
Yeah, it's really good, man.
I'm genuinely surprised that I don't know it, because I have people, I know friends that work at like Allagash and Maine Beer and Mason's Brewery. All right, sold.
Get a chance.
So, Carl, Hunter's an alumnus of Kensington Wine Market. Yeah. He traveled across America buying and drinking craft beer at one point in his life. So
that's fair.
He's a fan. Anyway, Carl, thanks again for hosting. I know it's a little bit late where you are, a little bit later. You've got travels ahead, but I really appreciate you doing this. Evan, thanks for being around for the commentary and speed round. Sean, thanks for making Hunter available and putting him on screen with a borderline offensive t-shirt for the northern half of our province. And thanks everybody for taking part in tonight's tasting. I hope you really enjoyed it. I think it was an incredible lineup. Really excited to see what you guys are doing with Ardnamurchan. And I didn't mention, this is that last thing. There's a Kensington wine market Ardnamurchan cask in Scotland, bottled, about to ship to
Forthcoming.
Canada. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully by the fall. A gentleman never discusses age, Devin. It's of an indeterminate age, under 10 years of age.
That's under 10. Yeah, can confirm that. Yeah.
You can confirm that pretty qualitatively.
Yeah.
But it's something coming, and it's pretty good. So Carl, thank you. Evan, thank you. Everyone,
Thanks for having me, guys.
part.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have an awesome night, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.